India has the principle of nonviolence and peace rather than war. India has a right, because of Gandhi and because of Buddha and because of Mahavira of the Jains, to say that nonviolence is a principle of the country. In the 21st century, we should have peace and we should have universal democracy. Because in democracy, one man cannot make a choice to go and blow up another country. Chinese people are just people, and every people, even in a family, people like to be free. They don't want to be completely bossed by one person. I see it in the terms that the Prime Minister laid out early on yesterday, where he mentioned that India has the principle of nonviolence and peace rather than war. Whereas many countries, their major effort and major expense is defense, and which they call it defense, and then now and then one of them invades another country. For example, the United States foolishly invaded Iraq the second time, and Afghanistan occupied. They had a right to attack their enemies in Afghanistan, who bombed New York, but after that, to occupy the country was a terrible mistake. As obviously they had to leave eventually after much destruction, and now Russia has invaded Ukraine, and that's really terrible. And in the old days, China invaded Tibet, and it never is helpful to people when a big country invades a small one. So India has never really done a big invasion on anybody, and they're not perfect, of course, but they've had to defend themselves, of course, on the other hand. And so India has a right, because of Gandhi and because of Buddha and because of Mahavira of the Jains, to say that nonviolence is a principle of the country, and that does make sense. And also it happens to be the land that the subcontinent where the Buddha took birth, although the modern country of India, of course, didn't exist at that time. There were many small countries. And so they have every right to be the center, to assemble all the Buddhists, and to stand for the principle, and even not to give up the hope that the world can be a world at peace. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who also blessed this conference enormously by coming today, he always says, has been saying for 30 years, that the 20th century was a century of terrible violence, the world wars marking the end of colonialism worldwide, and that the 21st century has to be a century of peace. Unfortunately, these first 23 years of this century there have been terrible wars, and the U.S. is guilty to some extent. My country is guilty of the unprovoked war. Their defense, or the one where they pushed Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait, was justified by UN, but the second one was not. And they did that, and then Russia has done several things. But it isn't really Russia. It's not the Russian people. It's a little clique, a dictatorial clique, just personal vanity. I want that country, and then everybody gets killed. So this is a proof that in the 21st century we should have peace and we should have universal democracy. Because in democracy, one man cannot make a choice to go and blow up another country. It's not possible. And therefore, that's too dangerous to have such a power in the hands of one man, who might go a little crazy, might be a little egotistical, or get confused, So democracy, people have to argue out, and then it's very chaotic. And democracy fits with the way Buddha organized the Buddhist order, Buddhist community, that the abbot is not all powerful, and obedience is not a big virtue of a monk. Wisdom and compassion is the virtue of a monk, and self-restraint, but not obedience to authority. So, freedom is the thing that people need. That's what human beings need to flourish. So India is a free country, a bit chaotic like the U.S. is, but we have to be partners in seeing that the whole planet is like that, and then we can have a planet of peace. The danger of dictatorship is that the dictator has to suppress their own people, because it is not true that Chinese people are not the same human beings who like freedom, because they are. There's some theories that some people have said that, Chinese people don't want democracy, and they pretend that's a Western invention or some nonsense like that. Actually, Chinese people are just people, and every people, even in a family, people like to be free. They don't want to be completely bossed by one person. And also their talents can't come out unless they're free, so they won't be creative and so on. So the point is that I see that dictatorships, therefore, are dangerous because their own people resent being bossed around by the dictator. So the dictator has to push, let's say there's an enemy out there and we have to fight the enemy. They try to deflect the resentment of the people against them, against some foreigner, and then they make a war. And that's an age-old principle that everyone can observe in history. So we don't need people like that. We need governance where people can have their say right at home and they feel free to say it. They will disagree. There will be maybe local squabbles and fights because humans are like that. But overall, they are not so much danger to their enemy, to their neighbors. The Dalai Lama's prediction that the world in this next century can be peaceful and will be, I think is correct. I think the KGB, the CIA, whatever the Chinese version of that is, they still stuck there from World War II. They took power at that time. As Gandhiji predicted, actually, in England, he got in trouble. He predicted that to Churchill, that in defeating the Nazis, some Nazi-like people would get control of the big countries, the Allies, and they wouldn't let go, you know. And today in the United Nations, the 5 permanent Security Council powers are the 5 big arms dealers on the planet, and the 5 dangerous, and so they naturally are not making peace. And that has to change. And for example, India, is a huge country, should be in the Permanent Security Council. Brazil, you know, Germany, Japan, you know, not just the 5 people who think they won World War II.